At 01:47 a.m. on November 28, 2025, the captain of the Russian tanker Kairos is casually checking his radar off the coast of Turkey, completely unaware that a Ukrainian sea drone has been stalking his wake for the past 2 hours. In exactly 180 seconds, his $50 million ghost ship will become the Black Sea's newest artificial reef, courtesy of a plastic boat worth less than his monthly fuel budget. While Trump is down at Mar-a-Lago raising a glass to his new peace deal of the century, Putin is doubling down, pushing 1,400 ghost ships through these waters to fund his war machine. They think these neutral waters are safe. That is a fatal calculation. Ukraine isn't waiting for the ink to dry on any treaty. They just sent 2 Sea Babies to collect the debt in cash, specifically 500 pounds of RDX at a time. Meet the 2025 edition Sea Baby. It's 20 feet of stealth fiberglass, hits 50 knots, and costs just $250,000. It is piloted via Starlink with a fiber optic backup that makes jamming impossible. The target? To choke off a $70 million a month revenue stream by turning the Kairos and the Virat into floating fireworks. The countdown starts now. 6 p.m. local time. The operation begins at sunset from a hidden base near Odessa. 2 Sea Babies hit the throttle, accelerating to 50 knots instantly. At that speed, water isn't soft. It feels as hard as concrete. Every wave acts like a sledgehammer hitting the fiberglass hull. A human pilot would have his spine shattered after 10 minutes of this beating, but these boats are unmanned. They carry only computer servers and 1,500 pounds of RDX, and neither of them complains about the rough ride. To cross the Black Sea without being detected, the Ukrainian operators play a high-stakes game of hide and seek. Nature provides the cover. A thick blanket of Bosphorus fog rolls in, dropping visibility to under 500 yards. To a sailor looking out a window, the world is just a gray wall. But Russian radars can see through fog. That is where the cleverness kicks in. The drones aren't staying silent, they are lying. They broadcast a fake automatic identification system signal on 161.975 megahertz. On Russian radar screens, these lethal weapons show up as a harmless Turkish municipal ferry on a late-night schedule. It is digital camouflage, like a bank robber putting on a security guard's uniform to walk right past the front desk. And here is an efficiency trick that would make an Amazon logistics manager jealous. Instead of burning precious fuel fighting the water, the pilots find the Bosphorus current, a natural stream of water moving at 3 knots. They throttle down and ride the flow like a surfer catching a wave, extending their range by 20%. Back in the Kiev bunker, the pilots see only black static and green data, their heart rates syncing with the rhythm of the waves. They are invisible, efficient, and closing in. Let's look at the prey. The Kairos and the Virat aren't just boats, they are floating skyscrapers lying on their sides. Each one is 623 feet long and displaces 105,000 deadweight tons. Right now, they are chugging along at a leisurely 12 knots, completely unescorted. Why? Because escort ships cost money, and escorts draw attention. Putin is running his shadow fleet like a discount trucking company, cutting corners on security to maximize the profit margin. On the shore at Novorossiysk, the Russian coastal radar sweeps the sector. The operators see 2 blips. Their computer screens read Turkish ferry. They check the schedule and it matches the fake data the drones are broadcasting. They shrug and go back to drinking their tea. They are looking at a wolf but seeing a poodle because the paperwork says it is a poodle. But the situation on the bridge of the Virat takes the prize for dramatic irony. The crew is running a skeleton watch, half asleep at their stations. The captain isn't scanning the dark water for threats. He is staring at his phone, scrolling through Telegram, likely typing a message to his wife. "Smooth sailing tonight, honey. I'll be home for dinner tomorrow." He doesn't know it yet, but he is standing on top of a $50 million bomb, and his smooth sailing has exactly 45 minutes left on the clock. It is the classic mistake of the overconfident, assuming that just because you can't see the shark, the water is safe. The Ukrainians aren't just getting lucky out there in the dark. They are ruthlessly exploiting the only 2 things on Earth that Vladimir Putin cannot jam, bribe, or intimidate: physics and international law. First, you have to understand the physics of the kill zone. The Sea Baby has a vertical profile of about 18 inches above the waterline. In the world of naval radar, that is effectively invisible. When a Russian radar beam hits the choppy ocean surface, it bounces back and creates sea clutter, digital static that looks like snow on an old TV. To a Russian operator staring at his screen, trying to spot a sea baby hiding in 3-foot waves is like trying to find a specific piece of hay in a haystack that is currently on fire. The drone isn't jamming the radar, it is simply hiding inside the noise, effectively vanishing into the ocean itself. But here is where the Ukrainians turn this from a stealth mission into a psychological trap. They are operating in what we call the hesitation zone. They are 28 miles off the coast of Turkey in international waters that are crawling with civilian traffic. Remember that fake AIS signal broadcasting Turkish ferry? That is their diplomatic armor. Even if a Russian captain gets a lucky glint of something on his sensors, he is frozen. Think about his position. He is staring at a blip that identifies as a neutral vessel from a NATO country. If he opens fire and accidentally sinks a real boat carrying tourists, he doesn't just lose his job, he triggers Article 5 and starts World War III. The Ukrainian operators know this. They are using the Russians' own fear of NATO as a shield. So, the Russians are trapped in the ultimate checkmate. They are physically blinded by the sea clutter and politically handcuffed by the location. They are locked in a dark room with a knife-wielding assassin, but they are too terrified to pull their gun because they might shoot the landlord. And while they sit there paralyzing themselves with the rules of engagement, the Sea Baby is closing the distance at 80 feet per second. The Russians are betting on the safety of the law, but Ukraine is betting on the lethality of high explosives. And in the middle of the Black Sea, physics always wins. At 02:12 a.m., the game of hide-and-seek comes to a screeching halt. Sea Baby number 1 closes to within 1 nautical mile of the Kairos. Maybe the fog lifted for a second, or maybe a Russian lookout finally put down his vodka and looked out the window. But the radio on the tanker's bridge screams a warning. On the shore, the Russian electronic warfare units panic. They slam the panic button, activating a shore-based Krasuka 4 jamming system. This system is designed to blast enough electromagnetic noise to fry every Starlink connection and GPS receiver within 20 miles. On the Russian screens, they see the electronic signature of the drone vanish. The Russian commander likely leaned back in his chair, smirking, thinking he just blinded the attacker and sent it drifting harmlessly into the dark. He is dead wrong. In the Kyiv bunker, the pilots didn't even blink. The video feed didn't glitch, it didn't lag. It remained as crystal clear as a 4K Netflix stream. Why? Because the Ukrainians anticipated this exact moment. Weeks ago, they retrofitted these drones with a piece of technology that feels almost medieval in its simplicity but is revolutionary in practice. 10 miles of fiber optic cable. Think of it like this. The Russians are trying to jam a Wi-Fi signal by screaming into a megaphone. But the Ukrainians aren't using Wi-Fi anymore. They just plugged in an Ethernet cable. As the drone races forward, a spool inside the hull unwinds a micro-thin strand of glass, maintaining a hard physical connection to a relay buoy floating miles behind. There are no radio waves to jam. There is no frequency to hack. You cannot jam a beam of light traveling inside a glass tube. It is the ultimate screw you to modern electronic warfare. On the bridge of the Kairos, the captain realizes the jamming has failed. He screams for a hard turn to port, trying to present a smaller target. But physics is about to hand him a harsh lesson in inertia. The Kairos is fully loaded. It weighs as much as an aircraft carrier. You don't just turn a ship like that. It steers like a floating warehouse. The rudder moves, the engines groan, but the hull keeps sliding forward on its original vector, drifting helplessly like a cow on ice. The Ukrainian pilot watches the massive black hull fill his screen. He doesn't need to lead the target. The ship is practically stationary compared to his 50-knot approach. He adjusts his aim, targeting the engineering section aft of the beam. Impact. Sea Baby number 1 slams into the port side at full throttle. The 1,500-pound warhead doesn't just explode. It detonates underwater, creating a bubble of gas that expands and collapses in milliseconds. The shockwave hits the hull with 1,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. It doesn't punch a hole. It snaps the ship's keel. The blast tears through 3 watertight compartments instantly, turning the engine room into a twisted sculpture of steel and oil. But the night isn't over. 45 minutes later, the crew of the second tanker, the Virat, is busy watching the Kairos burn. They are lined up on the rail, holding up their phones, live streaming the inferno to Telegram. They are so focused on getting the perfect camera angle for their social media that they never see Sea Baby number 2. This is the darkest kind of dramatic irony. While they are filming a disaster, they become the disaster. The second drone hits the Virat amidships. The explosion is even more violent this time because the fuel vapors in the empty tanks ignite. The ship lights up the Black Sea like a supernova, and the last thing the Russian livestream broadcasts to the world is the screen turning white. The Russian electronic warfare commander is still staring at his jamming console, wondering why his billion-dollar system couldn't stop a plastic boat on a fishing line. He just learned the hardest lesson of the war. You can hack a computer, but you can't hack a physical cable. The radio frequencies over the Black Sea aren't just busy anymore, they are a graveyard of desperate voices. The captain of the Kairos is screaming Mayday on channel 16 so loud he is distorting the microphone. Drone attack, fire everywhere, we are listing 15 degrees. But his pleas are echoing into a geopolitical void. Then comes the diplomatic slap in the face. Turkish Coast Guard vessels race out of the Bosphorus Strait, their blue lights flashing. But they aren't just there to save lives, they are there to draw a line. They broadcast a stern warning to the Russian salvage tugs trying to leave Novorossiysk. Maintain your distance. This is a Turkish search and rescue operation in controlled waters. The Russians have to sit on their hands and watch. They are forced to witness their $50 million assets burn from 20 miles away, blocked by a NATO ally that is politely telling them to stay in their lane. It is the ultimate humiliation. Watching your house burn down while the neighbor holds the garden hose and forbids you from entering the yard. Meanwhile, the Virat is entering its final moments. The fire from the drone impact has licked its way into the residual fumes of the empty cargo holds. The physics of a fuel-air explosion are simple and unforgiving. 20 seconds. The steel plating on the deck begins to buckle and glow cherry red as the internal temperature spikes past 2,000 degrees. 10 seconds. The structural integrity of the hull gives up the ghost. 0. The Virat doesn't just sink, it disintegrates. The remaining fumes ignite in a chain reaction that lights up the horizon like the 4th of July. It is a catastrophic deflagration that sends a mushroom cloud of oily smoke climbing into the night sky. Back in the bunker in Kiev, the telemetry feeds from both drones finally cut out. The screens flicker once, then go to pure static white. The pilot takes off his headset and rubs his eyes. There are no cheers, no high fives. Just the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. The mission clock stops. 2 ships down. 0 casualties on the Ukrainian side. Mission complete. Let's slow this down and look at the brutal physics of what just happened. When Sea Baby number 1 struck the Kairos, it hit at a perfect 90-degree angle. This matters. It means 100% of the kinetic energy was transferred directly into the hull. The 1 to 500-pound warhead wasn't filled with standard gunpowder. It was packed with RDX, an explosive compound with a brisance velocity that makes TNT look like a firecracker. When it detonated just below the waterline, it created a bubble of gas expanding faster than the speed of sound. Since water cannot be compressed, that shockwave had only one place to go, through the ship. It hit the 25mm steel plating with 1,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. Steel is strong, folks, but against that kind of force, it behaves like wet cardboard. The shockwave didn't just punch a hole, it shattered the ship's keel, the literal spine of the vessel. The Kairos broke its back. Inside, the residual fumes in the pipes ignited, sending a jet of liquid fire racing 200 feet down the corridors. It was a structural death sentence carried out in milliseconds. Now, let's look at the scoreboard, because the financial damage is where the real pain is. On one side, you have Ukraine, who spent about $500,000 on 2 drones. That is the price of a nice house in the suburbs. On the other side, you have Russia. The Kairos and the Virat are total write-offs. That is $100 million in floating hardware turning into scrap metal. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. Those ships were carrying, or about to carry, $70 million worth of oil. That revenue is gone, vaporized. But here's the strategic kicker that Putin is waking up to this morning: panic. The Shadow Fleet relies on being invisible and low cost. Overnight, maritime insurance premiums for Russian tankers entering the Black Sea just spiked by 300%. Captains are refusing to sail. Crew members are demanding hazard pay. By destroying 2 ships, Ukraine didn't just sink metal, they destroyed the business model. Analysts estimate this single night cost the Kremlin $500 million in projected annual revenue. That is $500 million that won't be buying tanks, bullets, or paying soldiers. If you were that Russian captain, what would you have done differently? Jumped overboard? Prayed? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed watching Putin's wallet take a hit as big as his ego, smash that like button. It helps the channel, and it probably annoys a bot farm in St. Petersburg. Subscribe for more, because with 400 more ships in that Shadow Fleet, I have a feeling the Sea Babies are just getting started. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.